Afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Justin Doyle, and I'm the James River Association's Community Conservation Manager. And I'm joined by our Program Director, Shawn Ralston. And today we're presenting Benefits of a Healthy James Riverside Parks. It's the first of three webinars that we are offering leading up to our release of the 2021 State of the James. So today, we'll dig into the State of the James report. We'll also review some public access and Riverside Park visitation data in the James River watershed. We'll have a conversation with Riverside Park managers. We're fortunate to have Alistair Perkinson from James City County and Bryce Wilk from Richmond's James River Park System with us today. We'll also have an opportunity for participants to ask questions and then conclude the webinar with some information about our future webinars and the 2021 State of the James release. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to Shawn Ralston, James River Association's Program Director, to tell us about the State of the James.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. And as Justin mentioned, I'm Program Director with the James River Association. We are conducting these webinars sort of to get people excited about the next release of our biennial State of the James report, which we'll be releasing sometime in late October. Our last report was released in 2019, and so this will be the 2021 version of that report. Our report card is really an assessment of the health of the river. We've evolved a great deal since we first started putting together data for this report, which was back in around 2007, I believe, was the first iteration of the report. And at that time, we were kind of putting everything down in text and releasing more or less like a pamphlet of information for people to read through. Now we have pretty much taken most of that information and put it onto our website. We still have a brochure that we can provide people, but most of the information you'll find on an interactive website, which I'll talk more about in just a second. Go on to the next one, Justin. So in order to assess a score for the James River, we really look at two different sets of indicators. The first being river health, and within river health, we look at different types of fish and wildlife that you commonly find within the James, and then we assess a score for fish and wildlife. We also look at the habitat that the fish and wildlife depend on in order to survive, and so things like underwater grasses and riparian buffers. And then we also assess a score for restoration progress. So here we're looking at pollution reductions and how we're doing in terms of reducing the amount of sediment in the river. As I'm sure most of you are familiar, anytime it rains, the river turns very brown, and that's as it relates to the sediment that we find that erodes from the stream banks all across the watershed. And so we look at the level of pollution that has been reduced and assess a score for that. And then we also assess a score for protection and restoration actions. So things like stormwater strategies and agricultural protection actions, wastewater reductions, things like that is what we're looking at here. So we assess a score for river health, we assess a score for restoration progress, and then we average those scores to come up with a final score, which is the final score for the report that year. So go on to the next slide. One thing I'll note is the James is really a success story. Back in the mid-1970s, we had a pretty bad, devastating accident that occurred just downriver from us here in Richmond in Hopewell. And with that, there was dumping of an insecticide called keepone. And the result of that was that the river was closed to fishing from Hopewell to Chesapeake Bay for almost 14 years. And nationwide, this really caught people's attention. Since that time, the health of the river has improved significantly. And back in 2019, when we released the last version of the State of the James report, we were at a B-. So back in the 70s, we would have been at, a failing grade just as a result of all of the contamination that was happening. So really, this is a result of all the investments that are being made at the federal and the state level to improve water quality, the protections and the rules that are in place now to protect water quality, and then all the grassroots efforts that we're seeing at the local level by volunteers and by groups such as ours at the James River Association to protect the health of the river and to improve it. With river health, the score went down slightly, but in a minute, I'll kind of explain why that happened and why we didn't see this as is a terrible thing. Back in 2007, when we first started pulling together data for this report, the river health score was really more at a C level. And now we are seeing consistently that it's at a B-. Going to the next. Oh, I think there may have been one before that, Justin. Yeah, there you go. River restoration progress is the other indicator we look at. And with this, we saw that the score went up. And this was really key to ensuring that the overall score for the river did not go down. As you'll see, back in 2007, the score would have been at a 46%, which was a C. And so even though we're still at a C+, we've gone up significantly here. And most of that is by way of the significant investments that we're seeing being made at the state level to put in place things like agricultural pollution controls and stormwater protection strategies, wastewater improvements. And so next slide, Justin. And so as you'll see, the overall score for the river back in 2019 was at a B-. It was also a B- in 2017. And so no change in the score. However, Justin, can you go to the next slide? Some of the key conclusions that we drew from this was that if you remember back in 2018, we had some record rainfalls. And so as a result of those record rainfalls, we had a lot of increased polluted runoff associated with the heavy downpours. And so we had some setbacks in the number of our indicators, including bacteria levels were up. So that number went down as well. Tidal water quality, and that relates a lot to the clarity of the water, and the clarity of the water goes down whenever there's a lot of sediment in it. And so that indicator went down as well. And then oysters are also greatly affected by those heavy rainfall events. And so because of this heavy rainfall, a lot of our indicator scores went down. We did see some other indicators that remained strong, including bald eagles, which also are a success story, just seeing the great number of bald eagles that we see now, when back in the 70s you didn't see any. Smallmouth bass also remain strong. American shad is another fishery that we look at, and that's one that we are continuing to see steady declines with, and the score was down to 1% back in 2019. And I think we're going to see even lower numbers when we put out the report in 2021. So what the conclusion we drew from that is that we continue to see progress in areas where Virginia has made significant investments, like wastewater pollution controls and stormwater pollution controls, agricultural pollution controls. As a result of that, as a result of all these restoration strategies, even though we had these heavy rainfall events, we had protections in place that helped us from seeing the health of the river decline even further. So that sort of to us makes it clear that these restoration and protection actions need to continue in order for us to continue to balance out any of these rain events. And we likely will continue to see these heavy downpour events into the future. Virginia's newest cleanup plan provides a blueprint for achieving a grade A James River by 2025 and calls for even more investments in these pollution controls. Next slide. So I know we're going to talk a lot about public river access today. That's one of the benefits that we see from a healthy river. Also, over 2.7 million people rely on the James for drinking water. It's the largest drinking water source in the entire state of Virginia. Seafood production, we see a great deal of seafood produced from the river in terms of commercial fisheries and shell fisheries. Back in 2018, there were 6.1 million pounds of fish and shellfish that were landed from the river. This generates a lot of income for the economy. There were a great deal of hunting and fishing licenses, almost 500,000 people just in 2018. And then hand it over, Justin, to you, and we'll start talking more about the recreation benefits that we see from a healthy river.
Great, thank you, Shawn. Thank you so much for that overview of the state of the James.
While Justin's shifting over, I'll just one more quick plug. stateofthejames.org is where you can find more of this information and go to our cool interactive map.
So with the health of the James improving, we're seeing more interest in people choosing to recreate on its banks and on its tributaries across the James River watershed. And it really emphasizes the importance of public access. So what is public access? Public access sites are locations owned and managed by a public entity or a nonprofit organization in an agreement with a public entity, providing the following types of access. Boat-related access, think powerboats, canoes, kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, swimming access, fishing access, and viewing access. And this photo here is the Hopewell River Walk, which is a recent addition to Hopewell's riverfront on the Appomattox River. And it's a wonderful, wonderful example of public access. James River Association is a champion of increasing public access to James River and its tributaries, and our benchmark for public access is 45 new sites by 2025. We're doing really well. We are doing really well. 47 access sites have been added to the James River and its tributaries since 2013 when we established the benchmark, and that is 104% of our 2025 goal. So as of 2020, we have exceeded that 2025 goal. And here's a chart giving you an idea of the progress that's been made across the watershed since 2013. Steady increase in the number of new public access sites, not only driven by organizations like the James River Association. A lot of credit goes to the local governments and other organizations that have really seen the importance of expanding access to the James and its tributaries, and have really done a fantastic job of adding a variety of different access sites, ranging from riverside parks to boat ramps to canoe launches to boardwalks like the Hopewell River Walk. With public access comes new visitation, and visitation to riverside parks in the James River watershed exceeded 6.5 million visits in 2020. That's up from 6 million visits in 2019 and 5 million visits in 2018. 6.5 million visits to riverside parks in the James River watershed in 2020. That's exceptional visitation. Riverside parks in the middle and upper James region counted 400,000 visits. And those are riverside parks primarily upriver of Richmond. Think Lynchburg, Buchanan, and beyond. Riverside Parks in the Richmond region counted 3.4 million visits, and Riverside Parks in the Lower James region, down towards the Hampton Roads area of the watershed, counted almost 2.7 million visits. So the vast majority of our visitation is seen in the Richmond region and downriver towards the Chesapeake Bay. So before we start a conversation with Alistair Perkinson of James City County and Bryce Wilk of the city of Richmond, wanted to share some visitation data from James City County and the James River Park System with you. So this is Riverside Park visitation in James City County from 2016 through 2020. It's a handful of Riverside parks in James City County. Think Chickahominy Riverfront Park, Jamestown Beach, James City County Marina. Since 2016, with the exception of 2017, we've seen steady growth in visitation to Riverside parks. They're really below 1 million visits in 2016 to nearly 1.4 million visits in 2020. And Richmond's James River Park System, it is the most visited park system in the James River watershed. Its visitation rivals many national parks across the country, including Shenandoah National Park. In fact, I think the 2.1 million visits that it saw in 2020 actually exceeded Shenandoah National Park visitation. But since 2014, when we were counting less than 1 million visits to the James River Park System, we've seen, over 100% growth in visitation. And it's a wonderful, wonderful park system in the downtown area of our capital city, city of Richmond. So with that, I'm going to introduce our two park managers, Alistair Perkinson and Bryce Wilk. And Alistair, how about we start with you? Do you mind introducing yourself and the park system that you manage?
Sure. So thanks a lot, Justin. I'm Alistair Perkinson. I'm the Parks Administrator for James City County Parks and Rec. We serve about 85,000 citizens and have 17 parks throughout the county. And it's really, we kind of run the gamut from, like you mentioned, the Riverside parks with beaches, campgrounds, sports complexes, skate parks, playgrounds, interpretive areas. So we kind of have a wide range of activities in our parks. But like Justin mentioned, those Riverside parks are really among the top in terms of our visitation. And among those, we have Jamestown Beach Event Park, which is a very popular beachfront area on the James River, right next door to Jamestown Settlement. We have Chickahominy Riverfront Park, which is, like the name implies, right along the Chickahominy River, and it's a very popular campground area. And then we also have the James City County Marina, located right at the mouth of the Powhatan Creek near the beach area. And then in addition, we have a number of smaller sites for launching with access to, Powhatan Creek and Brickyard Landing also on the Chickahominy River there. And those, like you said, those have been very, very popular parks, and especially in the last year.
Bryce, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us about the James River Park System.
Thank you, Justin, and the James River Association for having me. And Shawn, thanks for going through all of the information for the annual reports or biannual reports. So my name is Bryce Wilk. I am now the Senior Superintendent for the City of Richmond, which includes the James River Park System, all parks in the Southern District from Forest Hill on south, and community gardens along with trails and greenways. And hopefully we'll be filling that superintendent position soon with the James River Park System specifically. As was referenced, we have a large number of visitors that have been coming to the James River, and I think 2020 really highlighted that. That was one of the safe places that people could go to. That was still open during our pandemic, and some people had been doing it for years, but others had rediscovered that, and they continue to utilize that into this year, which we're still seeing an increase in numbers. And we talk about visits. The way that we're able to measure it from the James River Park System side within the city of Richmond is we have trail and vehicle counters, and we have 20+ different counters throughout our park system that are calibrated in different ways. But it is an apples to apples comparison from year to year. So we're very confident in those numbers and the increase of it all. For those of you unfamiliar, the James River Park System consists of City of Richmond parks, and there's about 18 different parks or trails that we have along the river in this 7-mile stretch that's along the falls of the James. It goes from all the way at the upriver portion of Huguenot Flatwater, and it goes all the way down to Ancaro's Landing on the tidal portion of the James, and it includes a lot of other very popular spots along the way, including Pony Pasture, Belle Isle, the T. Tyler Potterfield Bridge, our North Bank and Buttermilk Trail systems, and even Pump House Park. So there's a lot to do in a kind of compact area, but you can still discover kind of your own little special places along the way.
That's fantastic. Bryce, what are some of the outdoor recreation activities that are common in the James River Park System?
That is a great question, Justin, because there are so many different things that you can do and get involved with in the park system. Very rarely do you have all of these options out your doorstep in such a compact area. Some of the popular activities that you can see, we'll start with the water activities, but they kind of permeate outward to some others. So the water activities, we have up to Class 4 whitewater rafting in this area, and that also includes our kayakers, stand-up paddle boarders. You can do the rapids, or you can even have flat water portions, including Huguenot Flatwater or down at Tredegar and at the tidal portion of Ancaros. We talked about the shad run that occurs here in the springtime. Well, Richmond happens to be one of the best places to look for shad or other migratory fish that come up and hit the falls of the James. So in the springtime, you will see a number of people on the shores of the James River fishing from every type of background who have been doing it for years. So it kind of highlights how important our fish are to this ecosystem. So again, fishing from smallmouth to migratory fish to largemouth to different types of catfish. And then from there, tubing is always kind of a fun thing that people get to do. We just want to make sure that people know how long it takes to tube certain areas of the James River. And then what comes from these activities are the mountain biking and trail running and nature viewing that we have all along this. And it's kind of this green, almost feels like a national or state park right in the middle of these skyscrapers of the city. So you could be hanging out in downtown on the 25th floor of a building, and then 10 minutes later, you're immersed in trees and feel like you're in the middle of the Shenandoah National Park, for example. So it's quite an impressive array of things. And I didn't even get to mention the rock climbing that we have in this area too.
That's pretty unique. Yeah. Alistair, what are some common outdoor recreation activities in your parks?
Yeah, so pretty similar. The only thing we're missing are the rapids and the rocks. But we have paddlecraft. I mean, kayaking, canoeing, stand-up paddle boarding is just become immensely popular. So we have a lot of those users, and we also rent those items out at a number of parks, and we've seen that really grow over the past 5 years. Fishing is very popular, especially on our parks along the Chickahominy River. Every weekend, pretty much, the Chickahominy Riverfront Park is filled with trucks and trailers for folks that have gone out on their boats to go fishing, and we also have a pretty popular fishing pier there. And then wildlife viewing is one of our top things. We have a very strong base of Virginia Master Naturalist volunteers in our area. And so we have a lot of citizen science projects along some of our Riverside parks, prothonotary warbler boxes at Chickahominy Riverfront Park. We have an osprey watch program that goes on at the marina and the beach and many of our other parks there. So we have a big presence there as well. So, and then just general beach going, that Jamestown Beach Event Park, since we made improvements to it a few years ago, is just extremely popular. The beach it looks like Virginia Beach on the weekends. It's full of people enjoying the river there. So
yeah, it's a beautiful beach, and I appreciate how accessible it is. So both of your park systems are seeing the highest visitation that they've ever seen. And both of you have kind of touched on the reasons why. But what's really driving this high visitation? Bryce, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm really happy that we're able to provide that outlet for people to discover nature or rediscover it, or just be able to enjoy it. I think part of that is the convenience that we have within the city of Richmond. It is literally out the back door, and we're trying to increase our ways of safe transportation to and from the river. And so you have scooters, you have bikes, we're increasing our bike racks in the area, and just educating people on the connectivity that we can do with our different parks in and around the city, including Bird Park and Bryan Park, to get you down to the river. This was the place that everyone knew about, but now is fully capitalizing, because I think it really helps with the mental and physical health, which is really something that was highlighted in 2020 and continuing on into here. We're more aware of the health benefits of it, and I think people are trying to capitalize on it.
Alistair, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's the combination of a couple things. Bryce kind of touched on it a little while ago, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a huge jump, and trails and water access were the top of that list. But like Bryce mentioned, that number has stayed up even after more things have opened up and indoor spaces have opened back up. Those numbers look like they're there to stay for now. And then another thing that kind of comes to mind is just the culmination of a number of initiatives and improvements made over the past couple decades here. One kind of neat fact is, even though Bryce's parks are over 50 miles away from ours, they're connected by a hard surface trail, the Virginia Capitol Trail there, and then all the trails that come in and out of that, and the pedestrian access that comes along with that. I think a lot of that's helped drive more and more people to these parks. So.
Yeah, what a wonderful thing the Virginia Capitol Trail is, and I'm glad you made that connection. Your park systems are linked.
Yep.
By that 52-mile long trail.
Yeah.
So as Shawn pointed out, the health of the James is improving. And how does the health of the James and its tributaries impact visitation to your park systems? I do want to mention that, just learned today that, here in the Richmond region, unfortunately, there was a sewer line that ruptured in Goochland along Tuckahoe Creek that resulted in a Virginia Department of Health advisory being issued. So there are circumstances that come about every now and then, but generally speaking, how does the health of the James and its tributaries impact visitation to your park systems?
I think as we went through the presentation, being able to see where it came from to where it is today, it gives people confidence that they are going into a healthy system. And it gets reinforced when you see all these beautiful green places. You do see the wildlife coming back to this area. We talk about down in our downtown area, we have an eagle's nest that took up residence this year. We do have osprey all over the place. So when you see wildlife interacting in this natural world, you have confidence that the river is on a healthy plane. And it's wonderful to get this report every year or every 2 years to be able to kind of see that upward trend. So people know where it came from, but they know that there's a lot of effort and energy from not just the government agencies, but from the community. And I think that helps build that trust up too, because it can't always just be a top-down impact. It does have to be kind of a grassroots bottom up. So with all these different support groups that are out there, people are looking at it as, I can trust it, I enjoy it, and I see 1 million people are going here a year. There must be something good about it. But one other thing I do want to mention that Justin, you talked about, it's still something that we are working on. The recent advisory is something that shows that we still need to continue to protect it. We can't just rest on what we've done to this point. There's still a lot of action that can be taken from a single person going out into the river and making sure they're cleaning up after themselves, or sometimes cleaning up after others. And then also the types of infrastructure we're putting in and making sure that we're being responsible stewards from the land management and water management side as well.
Yeah, I agree especially from the public confidence. You know, we were talking before this and that incident today, you know, we've been fielding calls about that, and we're fairly far away from that, but people are still pretty aware of what's going on. They want to make sure they can be, you know, safe and confident going out there. And also, you know, the impact it could have on fishing. Like I mentioned, fishing is a large activity in our area. Just as a kind of a side note, you mentioned the keep-hone in the 70s. Just recently reading about that, there was a large number of marinas and boat ramps and areas that completely closed down as a result of that, and probably areas that could be public access today that are no longer in operation because of that. So I do think that you know, making sure that we have a good healthy habitat for those activities to continue. I do know we've kind of made it a priority in all of our riverfront parks to make stormwater based improvements. So, you know, the beach, for example, we did a shoreline restoration and buffer plantings and different areas. And we're in the middle of a large shoreline restoration at Chickahominy Riverfront Park to improve that stormwater runoff quality into the river there and to preserve the banks of the park itself where we're eroding away. So, as a side note from that, we actually still exceeded our top visitation, even with half of that park closed for the past 12 months. So it just goes to show how many people are coming out. So,
love all the restoration work that you're doing down there, Alistair.
Yeah, that's so important. Justin, if I could just, I'm not sure if I can share my screen. Yeah, let's see here. I do, can you guys see that map that I just pulled up? Okay, I also wanted to mention, I talked about how we look at bacteria as an indicator for the health of the river. Really, we're looking at long-term trends with that indicator when we're assessing your score for the State of the James report. But also, I wanted to mention that we do monitor bacteria on a weekly basis during the swimming season through a network of volunteers. And this program we call James River Watch. You can go to our map at jamesriverwatch.org. And you can see all of the locations where we have volunteers going out and taking water quality samples on a weekly basis. We report the data going into the weekend every week between Memorial Day and Labor Day, which we consider the swimming season. And you can see going into the weekend as of Friday what the bacteria level looks like. And we try to coordinate these sites close to Riverside parks and access sites. So I just wanted to put in a quick plug for that as we were talking about bacteria pollution.
Yeah, James River Watch is a wonderful resource to use as you make plans to enjoy the James during the summer months. So Bryce and Alistair, what are the most visited parks within your park systems and what contributes to their popularity?
I'd say for us, it's Jamestown Beach Event Park probably leads that list, especially because most of those numbers of visitors come between, you know, April and October. And it's really, I think, a lot of the improvements we made. That beach has been there for quite some time. It was part of a private campground years ago, and it wasn't a heavily visited beach until we improved access, until we improved the beachfront area, added parking and other things to make it easier for people to get there and stay there. The other would be Chickahominy Riverfront Park. It's just been extremely popular for camping, for boating, and we hope to add some items in the future to make it even more popular for our local citizens to just go enjoy the river, walk the trails there and enjoy it. But I'd say those are the top two, with a close third being the James City County Marina, which is also undergoing extensive renovations this year, but that one is a little different in that we've got kind of an economic development angle there where there's a public-private partnership with a brewery on site, and there's plans down the road for potentially a restaurant and to go along with that marina area and the boat launch and the paddlecraft area. So those would be our top three.
And it seems like the parks that accommodate a variety of activities are the most visited. Is that the same in the James River Park system, Bryce?
Yeah, it certainly is when it comes to Belle Isle, which is generally our most visited portion of the park. There's a few factors that go into that. That's kind of iconic. People know about Belle Isle. They come visit it. It is somewhat conveniently located to the downtown portion of the river. And it's just, it does offer a little bit of everything when it comes to viewing of the rapids, nice sunning rocks, hillsides that get different views of the city skyline, or if you look upriver, it looks like just a natural landscape. And then it does have climbing walls, a skills bike park on it, and the historical and cultural pieces of Belle Isle are contributing factors. Pony pasture on weekends in the summertime because of the convenient location of the river, another beautiful section and a great launch spot for tubers and kayakers and kind of beginner paddlers in general. One that we've seen an increase in, and I'm pretty happy about, is Ancaro's Landing in / Manchester Docks. That's at our lowest portion, or the farthest downriver portion of the James. It does have a motorized boat launch spot, but I would say overall, compared to our other usages, it's kind of an underutilized area. It does have a large parking lot with solar lights. It has that boat launch spot. It's great for fishing, but it also offers the introduction to the historic Richmond Slave Trail, which is a cultural experience and pretty impactful. And then the start of the Poop Loop, which is a mountain bike / running trail. It's named that because it's right next to the wastewater treatment plant, but it gives you a little bit of everything all in one spot. And it's in an area that's kind of developing quickly on the Manchester side of the city of Richmond. So I think it's going to be a pretty popular outlet for a lot of those citizens in that area.
Great. So both of you mentioned accessibility and convenience being factors in visitation. And my question to you is, what are you doing to ensure that the diverse population has access to these wonderful public riverfront spaces?
I think for on our end, we've done a number of things at the beach. We've made a number of improvements to increase ADA accessibility to the beach. So we have a Moby mat so people can get down on the sand there. We have a floating wheelchair. We've made some ADA accessible picnic areas, all the walkways and parking to get everywhere you need to get in the park. And then in addition, we have a pretty diverse user group at the beach. So we do have signs in English and in Spanish to kind of communicate some of the things down there. In terms of access, like we mentioned, there's more and more trail access as we try to plan, to make sure there's pedestrian access to all these parks. But we've also looked and worked with our local Williamsburg area transportation for ideas on public transportation to all of our parks and kind of close that gap. It's one thing to have a park within so many miles of everyone, but sometimes those last couple miles are the hardest ones to travel. So we're still working on ways to make it so everyone can visit all of our parks.
Yeah, I think Alistair mentions a few points that I think a lot of popular locations are trying to deal with accessibility. And I look at that from a number of different perspectives. One of the big pieces that the James River Park system has going on, and it's been a lot of effort and work behind it, but is the universal access ramp at Huguenot Flatwater to allow people of different mobility levels to be able to access the water in that area. And that area was selected because It is a flat water portion, but there is the opportunity to expand it to go farther down into some more rapid areas. But you can start and stop at that location, which is great, and that will be breaking ground in September. The other part of our accessibility to the James River, we see the numbers increasing, but there are some limiting factors. We always have to balance our natural resources with the recreational opportunities. One of those ways to create bottlenecks or to limit it is that parking. Most of the James River park system is under a conservation easement, so we're not increasing our impervious surfaces. So that means parking's not going to increase. But what we are looking to do is increase our greenways and safe ways to get in and out of the James River through our green spaces with different parks and linking them together. Or, as we mentioned, that something like the Capitol Trail or the Fall Line Trail that's coming up, to be able to have these safe ways to get in and around and not have to park a car, or if you don't have access to a car. And then lastly, yes, part of that is our James River Park Master Plan and identifying those things and working with private vendors or the Greater Richmond Transportation group with GRTC, and trying to look at different bus routes that would actually get you there. And then finally, that last 10 minutes, a walk or something along those lines, we do want to make sure that green spaces are available to all of our citizens, especially using that 10-minute walkability kind of feature. Not everyone can live next to the river, but everyone should be able to access green spaces.
Yeah, great. Thank you both for those answers. And we do have a few minutes left to give participants an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box and we will do our best to answer it. While folks have an opportunity to ask questions, maybe I'll turn it over to Shawn to tell us a little bit about our upcoming webinars leading up to the release of the 2021 State of the James. Can you give us a teaser, Shawn?
Sure. As we mentioned earlier, we're doing this series of webinars just to get people excited about our next release of the State of the James report, which will be sometime in probably mid to late October is what we're shooting for at this point. We are trying to incorporate different elements of, why we care about the river means to us as citizens, what we gain from a healthy river. And we thought the first and most relevant at this point in time would be public access, just because of the things that we talked about today. So many more people are accessing the river. We have such a great resource here, but without a healthy river, we wouldn't be able to be in it and to physically access it. And so it's so important that we continue to see the health of the river increase. And so going forward, we're going to have one webinar each month in anticipation of the release of the State of the James report. And in each of these webinars, we're going to focus on another essential benefit that we receive from a healthy river.
Thanks for that, Shawn. And we have not received any questions. So this is the last call for questions. I think Alistair and Bryce did a fantastic job of telling us about their park systems and the importance of the water quality and its role in driving visitation. So we don't have any questions. I do want to thank Alistair and Bryce for joining us today. Thank you both for taking time out of your day and sharing information with us. I also want to thank Shawn for her presentation on the State of the James, and my colleague Angie Williams, who's working behind the scenes running technology for us. Thank you so much, Angie. And I hope everybody has a wonderful Thursday, and hope to see you on a future webinar.
See you at the river.
Thanks so much.